On a cold February morning in Birmingham, Alabama, a body was found dumped beneath a discarded mattress along a desolate path locals grimly refer to as Dead Man's Road. It was 20-year-old Mahogany Jackson, a young mother, a daughter, a vibrant soul full of hope for the future. Just hours earlier, she had been alive, frightened, cornered, but still fighting. She had managed to send desperate messages to her mother and sister, begging them to call the police, to save her. But it was too late. Mahogany hadn't been kidnapped by a stranger. She wasn't taken by force from the street. She had been lured, set up, tortured, and ultimately executed by people she knew, people she trusted, some even considered friends. They didn't just kill her. They humiliated her. They recorded her suffering on their phones. And when it was over, they discarded her like trash. What started as a petty argument turned into one of the most chilling acts of cruelty Birmingham has ever seen, a case so disturbing that veteran investigators openly called it barbaric. This story isn't just about murder. It's about the darkness that can hide behind familiar faces. It's about how trust can be manipulated and how, sometimes, monsters don't look like strangers at all. Have you ever witnessed a betrayal this dark? Drop your city in the comments. We cover stories from all over the world. Do not forget to kindly like, share, and subscribe to this channel.
New developments in the case of Mahogany Jackson. Birmingham police say 8 people played a role in her deadly kidnapping back in February. WVTM 13's Magdala Lusan joins us now live with more. Magdala?
Yes, Sherry, a grand jury decided all of them will now be facing capital murder charges. These are the 8 people charged in Mahogany Jackson's murder. Some of them were already charged with capital murder. Others only sodomy and felony murder charges. That was until the grand jury recently decided and agreed with the Jefferson County DA that everyone should be charged with capital murder.
Before her name was tied to headlines and horror, Mahogany Jackson was a daughter, a sister, and most of all, a mother. She grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, surrounded by a tight-knit family that cherished her, especially her mother, Gail Maddox, and her sister, both of whom played central roles in her daily life. At just 20 years old, Mahogany had already taken on one of life's most demanding roles, raising a daughter. Her little girl was only 3, and despite the challenges that come with young motherhood, Mahogany poured herself into the task. Friends and family say she was loving, spirited, and fiercely protective of her child. That little girl was her world, and Mahogany wanted more than anything to build a stable, hopeful future for her. She faced real struggles. Like many young mothers, she was trying to balance the weight of responsibility with the dreams of a life still unfolding. She was working hard, reaching for opportunities, doing what she could to carve out a path towards something better, not just for herself, but for her daughter. And yet, even amid that struggle, Mahogany's light never dimmed. She had an infectious smile, the kind that lifted rooms. She helped friends when they needed her. She was present, grounded, kind. Her family remembers her not only as someone trying to survive, but as someone who was still learning to thrive. Her bond with her mother and sister was more than just close. It was protective, emotional, rooted in deep trust. They knew when something was off. And in those final hours, when Mahogany managed to send out a cry for help, it was to them that she turned. This wasn't a life headed toward darkness. This was a life full of promise, built on love, struggle, and an unshakable commitment to being the best mother she could be. That's who Mahogany was before it all was stolen. What makes this case so chilling isn't just the brutality, it's who was behind it. 8 young people, all between the ages of 18 and 26. Many of them knew Mahogany Jackson personally. Some were acquaintances. Some had spent time in her circle. These weren't strangers hiding in the dark. They were people she trusted enough to meet with. Their names now sit beside one of the most horrifying crimes Birmingham has ever seen. Brandon Pope, Francis Ace Harris, Jeremiah Kodak McDowell, Blair Green, Sinai McCall, Taja Lewis, Giovanni Clapp, and Ariana Lachey Robinson. According to court records, the attack stemmed from a petty dispute, an alleged theft involving one of the suspects. But what started as a confrontation quickly unraveled into pure, coordinated cruelty. On the night of February 24th, Mahogany was lured to an apartment complex in southwest Birmingham. It wasn't random. It wasn't impulsive. It was planned. And most disturbingly, it was personal. The trap was set under the guise of familiarity, a sense that she would be safe among people she knew. She wasn't cornered by a faceless threat on a dark street. She was invited. She walked in. That's the horror of it. There's a certain kind of danger that wears the face of a friend. Whether she was manipulated, coerced, or simply unaware of what awaited her, Mahogany entered that apartment with no way of knowing what would happen next. Once inside, everything changed. What unfolded was a disturbing descent into group violence, a dynamic where multiple individuals fed off each other's cruelty. The psychology is haunting. In these environments, violence becomes contagious. Boundaries collapse. Empathy disappears. And the presence of a group doesn't diffuse responsibility, it multiplies the damage. Each person there played a role, whether actively assaulting Mahogany, filming the abuse, or standing by and doing nothing. Not one of them stopped it. In the hours that followed, Mahogany endured unthinkable horror, humiliation, physical abuse, sexual assault. But before any of that began, it started with a betrayal from people who should have been nothing more than distant figures in her life, not monsters waiting behind a door. She thought she was walking into a space where she could explain, resolve, maybe even defend herself. Instead, she was ambushed. This is the kind of violence that doesn't begin with fists. It begins with a lie, with a setup, with the illusion of safety until it's too late. The deeper tragedy here is that Mahogany wasn't just the victim of individual cruelty. She was swallowed by a group dynamic that stripped her of her humanity in a space where everyone had a chance to stop it, and no one did. Her trust, her openness, her willingness to walk through that door, it cost her everything. Inside that small apartment in southwest Birmingham, the mask came off. Whatever familiarity or friendliness once existed between Mahogany Jackson and her attackers dissolved into pure violence. What happened over the next several hours was not a moment of rage. It was a sustained act of cruelty, recorded, witnessed, and committed without mercy. They stripped her, removing not just her clothes, but her dignity. They handcuffed her, rendering her powerless. She was pistol-whipped, beaten so viciously that investigators later described the wounds as evidence of sadistic torture. But it didn't stop there. Court documents and police reports confirm that Mahogany was forced to perform sex acts at gunpoint, a clear and brutal act of sexual assault with multiple people participating or enabling. Some filmed, some stood by, some took part. It was all captured on cell phone videos, later discovered by law enforcement. These weren't secret recordings, they were trophies of violence passed among themselves, as if what they were doing was something to be proud of. And as all of this happened, while she was pleading, bleeding, and broken, no one stopped it. In the background, there were neighbors. The apartment wasn't isolated. People lived nearby. But whether out of fear, disbelief, or simply not understanding what they were hearing, no one intervened. No one knocked. No one called 911. But Mahogany didn't give up. Even in that nightmare, she found a moment, a window of desperation to reach out. She somehow got hold of her phone, even if just for a few seconds, and sent texts to her mother and sister. The messages were frantic, direct, and chilling. She told them she was being held hostage. She shared her location. She pleaded for them to call the police. Imagine the strength it took, wounded, restrained, surrounded, to think clearly enough to try to save herself. That brief moment of hope, of fight, would be the last anyone would hear from her. Her mother and sister acted immediately, alerting authorities. But by then, the situation was spiraling out of control. As her captors realized she tried to call for help, the violence escalated further. Mahogany's cries went unanswered. Her pleas were drowned out by rage and chaos. Her fate, it seems, had already been decided. In those final hours, Mahogany was isolated, outnumbered, and out of time. Her final moments in that apartment were not only witnessed by those present, but preserved forever in digital footage, which police would later use to reconstruct the horror. It's a haunting irony. The same phones used to degrade her became evidence to condemn her killers. It's worth pausing here, not just to reflect on the violence, but the utter betrayal. Mahogany trusted some of these people. She didn't walk into that apartment expecting torture and execution. She came face to face with a level of cruelty most of us can't fathom, and she fought to survive, to get help, to go home to her daughter. She never got that chance. If someone you love texted for help, how quickly would you act? Let us know in the comments. We read every one. Mahogany's desperate outreach is a reminder. When someone reaches out, we must act fast. Seconds matter. Silence can be fatal. And in this case, even immediate action wasn't enough to save her.
Then that fat hoe talking about show her what's in our blood.
Why she want her to shit?
Oh, God.
When Mahogany Jackson sent her final messages to her mother and sister, it wasn't just an act of desperation, it was an act of courage. But in the darkness of that apartment, surrounded by people she once knew, her courage was discovered. Her captors saw the texts. They realized the police were on their way. And instead of fear or remorse, their response was swift and fatal. According to investigators, it was Francis "Ace" Harris who pulled the trigger. He allegedly shot Mahogany once in the back of the head, execution style. She didn't get a second chance. There was no more time to plead, no more hope to be rescued. Her life, her light, was extinguished in an instant. But even in death, Mahogany was treated with cold disregard. Her body wasn't taken to a hospital or left with a note or a phone call to her family. It was dumped discarded like trash beneath a soiled mattress on a stretch of land known locally and ominously as Dead Man's Road, an illegal dumping site in Birmingham. Forgotten. Hidden. For hours, no one knew where she was. Back at the apartment, just minutes after Mahogany's murder, her family's call had reached the police. Officers arrived swiftly, hoping they weren't too late. One of the suspects answered the door. With chilling composure, he told them Mahogany had left hours earlier. There was no blood visible, no body, and without a warrant or cause, police couldn't enter. It was a lie, and a delay that gave the group time to try to erase what they'd done. But erasing it would prove impossible. As the details of Mahogany Jackson's murder began to surface, the Birmingham community erupted in disbelief, grief, and outrage. A young mother, tortured and executed by people she knew. A body discarded under a mattress on a site known as Dead Man's Road. And the disturbing fact that parts of the crime were filmed by the suspects themselves. That outrage didn't just stay online. It ignited the investigation. Within hours, community members began flooding the Birmingham Police Department with tips. Some people recognized faces from the videos circulating on social media. Others had heard whispers. Some simply couldn't stay silent. Digital forensics played a crucial role. Authorities obtained and reviewed phone footage filmed during the assault. These weren't grainy, accidental clips. They were deliberate recordings. Police saw Mahogany's suffering, the brutality of the group, and even key faces. Every second of that footage helped piece together the timeline, the roles, and the crimes. By February 27th, just 48 hours after Mahogany's body was found, the work paid off. 8 individuals were arrested, all between the ages of 18 and 26. Francis "Ace" Harris, Brandon Pope, Jeremiah "Kodak" McDowell, Blair Green, Sinaya McCall, Taja Lewis, Giovanni Clapp, Ariana Lachey Robinson. Each of them had either participated in the assault or stood by while it happened. Some were directly involved in the torture. Others helped restrain Mahogany. Some filmed. Some hid the evidence. Their familiarity with Mahogany made the betrayal even more shocking. Many of them had been part of her social circle, people she had once trusted. And now, they faced some of the most serious charges under Alabama law. Capital murder during first-degree kidnapping. Capital murder during sodomy. Felony murder, later upgraded to capital murder for some. First-degree sodomy. First- and second-degree assault. Kidnapping. The charges weren't symbolic. Prosecutors made it clear they would seek the death penalty against the primary suspects, citing the especially heinous and cruel nature of the crime. When the suspects were brought before the court, Jefferson County Judge Kekia Davis made a bold decision: no bond. She stated unequivocally that no condition could ensure the safety of the community or of the suspects themselves. The suspects were remanded without bail. The courtroom was tense. Reporters noted that some of the accused showed no visible remorse. Outside the legal system, the emotional toll on Mahogany's family was visible. Her mother, Gail Maddox, who had shared Mahogany's final messages on social media in a desperate bid to save her daughter, was now using those same platforms to demand justice. She posted the booking photos of each suspect with a single word scrawled across them: monsters. That post went viral. Thousands of people responded with support, heartbreak, and anger. The images were chilling. Familiar faces now etched in the public eye for a crime that many could barely comprehend. The arrests brought some relief, but not peace.
He adds there is more work to be done. Now today, Judge Keisha Davis gave the state an opportunity to offer each suspect a plea deal, but the death penalty remains on the table for all of those suspects. Now one defendant, Jeremiah McDowell, his attorney spoke to us stating that his client is ready for the case to move forward, and Jackson's mom says despite how hard today is, she plans to be there every step of the way.
It's rough. Every time I come here, I have a horrible night before, and I'm going to have a horrible day when I leave here today. But every time I'm going to be here.
He's anxious to get his case in front of a jury so that he can get out of jail and exonerate himself. Like I said, he's innocent, and we expect to prove that in front of the jury.
Stuff is basically whether or not the state has an offer relative to settling the case, meaning a plea offer. Obviously, at this time, we relayed to the judge that we didn't have a plea offer. And we're not at that point yet. And we also notified the court that we filed a notice to seek the death penalty on each defendant
Someone
as
else
well.
is. This is a case that shocks the conscious. This is not your normal case, and I'm going to go out on a limb in any state.
Mahogany Jackson's death, leaving a community shocked nearly a week later.
Mahogany's death is indicative of many other homicides that we've suffered in our city. People that know one another are choosing violence against their fellow brother and sister.
Birmingham police believe Jackson was killed by people who were acquaintances to her, but detectives working the case are grateful for the community who stepped up with information, leading them to justice.
The community stepped up immediately. You have a 20-year-old that died a horrific death, and the Birmingham Police Department was able to arrest 8 people responsible for her murder.
Police say after Jackson was kidnapped, she did what she could to try to save herself. And safety experts want to make sure everyone is aware of safety features if their own lives are at risk, even texting 911.
If you contact 911 directly, that circumvents any delay that is in the system, and 911 also has the capability of sending you a hyperlink where you can basically share your
For
exact
Mahogany's
location.
loved ones, justice had only just begun. And for the city of Birmingham, the case became a call to action against group violence, against silence, and against the systemic failures that let something so horrifying unfold in the first place. Today, Mahogany's 3-year-old daughter wakes up without her mother. No bedtime kisses, no school drop-offs, no arms to run into when the world feels scary. She is left with memories too young to hold and questions too big to answer. And for Mahogany's mother, Gail Maddox, the grief cuts even deeper. Not just for the loss of her daughter, but for the brutal way it happened and the helplessness she felt receiving those desperate messages that night. The images of Mahogany's final moments are burned into the public eye, but for her family, it's personal. They are not just grieving, they are surviving. And Birmingham, the city that once held Mahogany's laughter, now carries her absence like a wound. Communities can't afford to forget her, because Mahogany wasn't just a victim. She was a mother, a daughter, a light. What happened to Mahogany Jackson wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. A reminder that violence doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from people we know, people we trust, people we never imagined would be capable of something so cruel. Groupthink, mob mentality, peer pressure. It's how a disagreement escalated into murder. How one alleged theft spiraled into torture, humiliation, and death. The people who hurt Mahogany didn't act alone, but together they fueled one another. Each punch, each command, each recording, every act encouraged or enabled by someone in that room. That's the terrifying psychology of group violence. It desensitizes, it disconnects, it destroys. And Mahogany believed she was walking into a place of safety, an apartment where people she knew were waiting. Instead, they were waiting to strip her of everything, her dignity, her freedom, her life. But where was the intervention before this? The red flags, were they missed? The tensions, the rumors, the shift in tone, was no one alarmed? Communities don't just suffer from violence. They sometimes enable it through silence. Someone always knows something. And when we don't speak up, we leave people like Mahogany to face the consequences alone. Then there's the role of digital culture, how normalized violence has become in the age of phones and likes. Her attackers didn't hide their crimes. They filmed them, shared them. What once would have been unthinkable has become content. But Mahogany's story reminds us, these aren't just viral videos. They are cries for help. They are evidence. They are a record of our failure to act before it's too late. Even in her final moments, Mahogany Jackson showed courage. She tried to get help. She messaged her mother. She shared her location. She fought. And because of her bravery, her killers didn't get away. Her voice, though silenced, is still speaking. In courtrooms, in communities, in every person who now asks, how do we make sure this never happens again? Because we must. We owe it to Mahogany. We owe it to every young woman who thinks danger can't come from someone they know. We owe it to the children left behind. And we owe it to the next Mahogany, because there will be another if we don't learn. This is not just a story of violence. It's a story of what happens when the safety net snaps, when trust is betrayed, and a young life full of promise is taken. But let Mahogany be remembered for more than how she died. Let her be remembered for who she was. A loving mother, a resilient spirit, and now, a name we won't forget. If you or someone you know is in danger, don't wait. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE-7233. Thank you for watching, and if stories like this matter to you, help us expose them. Like, comment, and subscribe to Crime Scene Exposed. We'll see you in next story, because the truth deserves to be heard.